I, 33 male, found out that my wife, 33 female, of 5 years, had been cheating on me with two different coworkers. My wife and I had a pretty standard marriage. We had our problems, but we always found ways to work through them. She and I had not been married long before the pandemic, and the constant isolation together brought up a lot of issues in our marriage that we hadn't really noticed before. We heard all over the news that the lockdown had caused a lot of divorces, and we didn't want to add our marriage into those numbers. We went to therapy to try to work through our problems, and we came out stronger on the other side, or so I thought. My wife had always been very career focused. She would work extra late hours, weekends. She would even go in on some holidays. She was close to making a partner at the law firm she worked at, and we knew that those sacrifices she was making would only pay off in the long run. So, when she wasn't coming home from work until 8 o'clock in the evening, I didn't really think much of it. Because of her job and the confidentiality involved, when she would get phone calls, I was used to her stepping away into her office to take them. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I got an email from an anonymous source about my wife. The email suggested that my wife might have been involved with one of her coworkers. I didn't believe it at first. I actually almost wanted to go to her and tell her that somebody was spreading lies about her, but something told me to keep it to myself. I replied back asking for further clarification, but I got none. Honestly, I wondered if it was a disgruntled client trying to tear at the threads of her life. Even though I didn't believe it, the idea of it still played in the back of my mind. It's difficult to admit, but I was a little paranoid about it. One night, shortly after I'd received the email, she texted me telling me that she would be in the office working on a case, and she didn't know when she would be back. Something in my brain tingled connecting that text message to the email that I'd been sent, and I needed to find out if the email was telling the truth. I didn't want my wife to know that I was suspicious of her, so I got some takeout and brought it to her office. Worst case scenario, I go in and she is in the middle of some sexual act with her coworker. Best case, I go in and she's knee deep in paperwork and happy I brought her some dinner. When I got there, it almost seemed like she must have left already. All the lights were off. There wasn't a soul in sight. I almost turned around and left, but then I heard the moaning. It was coming from down the hall, and I had to know if the email had been true. I walked down and saw my wife in her office with one of the partners of the law firm, and they were having sex. Now my wife is an attorney, and a great one at that. I knew right away that there was no forgiving her or pretending like this didn't happen, so my only option was to leave. But going up against her, her word versus mine, would never work out. I ended up hiring a private investigator to follow her around and gather some evidence. When I hired him, I assumed that I would just be getting some pictures or some videos of her and the partner, and I definitely wasn't expecting to find out she was sleeping with another coworker. She had been cheating on me with two different coworkers. I had plenty of evidence, so I sought out a divorce attorney. They knew who my wife was right away. She was coming up in the community, and she made quite a name for herself, but they agreed to take the case. While my attorney was getting the paperwork together, I knew I needed to do something to enact my revenge on her. I found her employee manual in her office, scored through it, and found some information that I definitely thought could help. Office romances were strictly forbidden. My wife was good friends with her boss, and there were a few times that he and I would get together to play golf, so I reached out to him and asked if he wanted to go out. He'd agreed, and I met him at the country club. During lunch, I told him everything. I showed him the evidence that I had. He was shocked that my wife would cheat on me with two different coworkers, and he was also appalled that they had so blatantly disregarded the company's rules, on company property nonetheless. He told me that all three of them would be facing termination. When I got home, my wife asked me about how golf was. I told her everything and told her that we were going to be getting divorced. About an hour later, When she was begging me to forgive her, her boss called and told her he wanted to speak to her first thing in the morning. She was fired the next day. She swore up and down that I had messed with the wrong person, that she was going to take me for everything I had, and I would regret the day that I screwed her over. Luckily for me, my divorce attorney was very good at her job. Thanks to the evidence that the private eye that I hired was able to gather, I was able to divorce her without sacrificing any of my assets. I'm not going to lie, it's been difficult adjusting to a life without her, but I'm noticing now a lot of the stressors in my life have gone away now that she is no longer in the picture, and I'm looking forward to fully healing from this and getting myself back out there. Edit. I realized I didn't put this in the original text, but the person who sent the email was the wife of the partner that my wife had been sleeping with. Apparently, she found text messages between them and thought she should tell me about it. Oh, B. I'm terribly sorry for what you had to go through. It's hard to believe that someone would stoop so low in their relationship. I'm glad you were able to leave the marriage without having to give up anything that you worked so hard for. All three of them getting fired for their actions was the least of their concerns. You handled yourself in a very mature way, bringing the attention to light without causing a scene with your wife in front of her boss too. I would be interested to know if she tried to come up with a reason for her infidelity or if it was just convenient for her to see both of the other coworkers. I hope you are able to recover from this soon and put yourself back out there, and I wish you nothing but happiness moving forward. Now, let's get into our second story for today. A decade ago, I, 43 male, stood at the altar, head over heels in love with my soon-to-be wife, 40 female. As soon as we met, we fell for each other. We never wanted to be away from each other, and we both knew almost right away that we had finally found the person we were meant to be with. We only dated for 6 months before we eloped together. Our lives had been amazing since then. Both of our careers took off. We had 2 children together, and we bought a wonderful home and the suburbs. We had the picture-perfect life. That is until it came crumbling down in front of us. She and I had always been transparent about the things going on in our personal lives, though we cherished our time apart to pursue our own personal interests. She had always been interested in things like pottery, art, and music, whereas I was pursuing a side hustle of making my own furniture. At the end of every day, we would climb into bed and tell each other what we did to fill the other in. In hindsight, she had left a lot of information out about what she was doing. It didn't strike me at the time, but when I would ask her about what she did, she would be vague compared to how she used to be, where she used to give me every detail of the pottery class she was taking. She was only telling me that they made pinch pots or they glazed the ceramics. She ended up taking a course at the local community college for business marketing. Because she and I had long been talking about creating our own home goods line, I would make the furniture and she would make decor, vases, glassware, etc. This class was something that I was also very interested in because of the prospect of it helping us later down the line. When I asked her for some of the details and to share some of the notes she had, she would get somewhat defensive and tell me that I didn't trust that she was doing a good enough job taking the course. That led to a huge argument between us, where she told me that I treated her like a child sometimes. I genuinely didn't know what she was talking about, but I promised her that I would try to work on whatever it was making me act that way. One thing that I did notice, but I didn't think much about, was she would get phone calls and excuse herself to answer them. Sometimes she would get text messages and she would tilt her phone away from me or lay down on the couch in the opposite direction so I couldn't see what she was texting. Not that I normally peered over her shoulder to read what it was, but it was the extra effort to hide it that was a clear sign of something wrong. I just wished that I'd realized that at the time. It all came to a head when my wife rushed into the shower after spilling coffee all over herself one morning. She was upset and frustrated and worried about being late for work, so she didn't bring her phone in like she normally did. Normally, she would bring it in and play music from the speaker while she showered. She left it sitting on the kitchen table, and I didn't think anything of it until a call came through from her professor. I was very curious about why he was calling her. Granted, it had been years since I'd been in college, but when I was in school, if a professor needed to get in contact with us, they would email us. The phone call ended, and I let my curiosity get the better of me. I opened up her phone while she was still in the shower and looked at their contact history. There had been dozens of calls between the both of them, some lasting as long as 45 minutes. Some were video calls, too. Immediately, I had a terrible feeling about what I would find in the text messages, but despite my better judgment, I opened them anyway. They had both been exchanging explicit graphic text messages between each other alongside pictures. My heart shattered when I saw everything. At the time, that was the first sign of anything going on that I picked up on. I was completely blindsided by the news. How could my wife have done that to me? How could she have betrayed our entire family? I could still hear the shower running, but I knew I only had a few minutes to figure out what I wanted to do with that information. At the very least, I know I wanted to get him fired. If I confronted my wife about it right then, she likely would have deleted the evidence and I would have had nothing to show the school. I ended up screenshotting some of the more explicit parts as well as some of the pictures they had exchanged, then texted them to myself. After I did that, I deleted the screenshots and the text messages between us. Before my wife got out of the shower, I yelled through the door that I had to leave to go into work a little bit early. I simply could not look at her after what I saw. I ended up taking the day off work and spending it near the docks watching the seagulls over the water. During that time, I figured out how I wanted to go about this. My wife had been dying to get all of our friends and some of our family together for a potluck dinner, so I decided to make that happen. Most of our friends were people that we knew through my work, and my wife was very close to my sister and her husband. I knew if I wanted to hurt her back, it would be by tarnishing her relationships with these people. The day of the dinner, I scheduled a meeting with the dean of the college my wife had been taking the course at. While I was there, I showed her all of the details about how a professor was sleeping with a student and exchanging very inappropriate messages. I showed her the evidence, and the dean made it seem like this wasn't the first time there had been a complaint about that specific professor. She promised to make sure the proper actions were taken to terminate him this time. When the potluck eventually rolled around and all of our friends walked into our home with their dishes, everything seemed normal. I had planned on making a toast to everyone, then telling them about the impending divorce between my wife and I, but fate had another plan in mind. The professor stormed over to the house, banging on the door. I answered it, and he pushed past me and rushed over to my wife to yell at her. He demanded to know why she told the dean about their relationship. Everyone else in the room watched completely stunned. I spoke up and told him that I was the one who told the dean. My wife looked at me in complete shock. I told her that I found her text messages and the dinner was my official announcement of our separation. The professor was so upset with me for costing him his job that he lunged across the table at me to attack. I am much larger than him. I work out regularly, so I was able to subdue him quite easily. However, I was definitely keen on pressing charges on top of getting him fired. In the end, my wife practically begged for my forgiveness because she realized how crazy the professor was. However, I had absolutely no interest in forgiving her. For our children's sake, I would be amicable and try to make sure the divorce wasn't messy, but there is no chance she and I will be together again. Opie, first of all, I want to offer my condolences for everything you went through. Sometimes it's the people you trust the most who will throw that away over nothing. It's hard to acknowledge the signs of the time, but from what you described, they definitely were all there. It's probably for the best that the professor lost his job, especially if it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. It's unfortunate that he decided to take his frustration for his own deeds out on you. He brought his punishment on himself. I'm happy you were able to move on from your wife and maintain a friendly relationship for your children, and I wish you nothing but the best in the future. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Hey folks, welcome back to my channel Relationship Haven. I hope you are all having a wonderful day or evening. In today's story, Opie found out his girlfriend was cheating on him and got sweet revenge on both her and her affair partner. In today's second story, Opie found out his wife cheated on him after he saw a crazy text on her phone that said, "Can't wait to see you in my hot now." Let's get into today's stories. Somi and my girlfriend have been dating for 2 years. We met at a common friend's party and instantly clicked. Our lives have been good since because we are financially stable and living in the apartment that my father gifted me when I graduated. I love my girlfriend and believe she is the most important person in my life, as I don't have many friends who I can open up to. She is the one who always supports me emotionally, but due to work reasons, she had to move to a different state for 2 months. We talked every day on the phone during that time, and I even planned a surprise for her, but when she came back and I discussed it with her, she didn't react the way I imagined she would. She declined and said she just wants to be alone. Normally, she never declines a surprise or anything like that, but I understood that she might be tired, so I asked if we can shift the date to another day. She didn't reply, and I felt this behavior was quite odd. Since that day, I've started feeling that she is trying to distance herself from me, but then after a month passed, she said, "Let's plan a vacation." I agreed, and then we planned things and enjoyed ourselves and all, but during the vacation, she went to her friend's house alone. I didn't know her friend lived there, and she even refused to let me come with her. Now, 2 months after our vacation, I found out why she has been behaving like this. One day, I was in the bedroom and my girlfriend was in the shower. Her phone beeped and I saw a text that shattered my heart. The text said, "Hey beautiful, did he go to sleep?" I was shocked and then started reading the chats. I found out that she had been cheating on me with a guy she met on her work trip, and there was also a photo of them at the place we went on vacation. They were talking about doing the deed and how they loved it and managed to pull it off without me knowing. Update. So, it's been 5 to 6 days since I posted about how my girlfriend of 2 years cheated on me and also manipulated me to go on vacation to a place where she could hook up with her cheating partner. So, I left home the night I posted the story to get away with the emotions and told her that I was going to my friend's house. I wasn't able to sleep all night and was reading the comments, and people were saying that I should leave her as she was using me. There were a few comments saying I should get some kind of revenge. I didn't want to get any revenge as I still loved her even though she did all this to me. So, I went to my parents' home and talked to my mother, and she was devastated. She said she thought our relationship was perfect and was looking forward to our marriage. That night, I thought about the whole thing and decided that I would go on and leave her for good and go on a nice vacation or do something like that. So, I went back to my house, but she won't believe what I saw. It didn't even take her a night to call her partner to my house and cheat on me. I didn't want to take any sort of revenge at first, but the scenery of her lying on the bed with another man and the opportunity gave me a perfect idea. I took photos of them while they were deep in sleep. Then I went back as I wanted to get some time before confronting her. Later that day, I called that guy anonymously to a cafe and also took my girlfriend to that same cafe so they could meet up. You should have seen the look on her face. Also, I did take screenshots of their chats. Now comes step 2 of my plan. I found out everything I could about the guy's background. I know it may be unethical, but one of my online friends is good with tech stuff, so he managed to collect all his background data and found out that he has a wife and 2 kids. The story gets even crazier. I called his wife and explained to her everything, then told her about my plan, and she was sad but agreed to it. Step 3. I now had all this guy's information and decided to send it to him anonymously. I told him that I would destroy his life if he didn't leave my girlfriend alone. Moments later, he broke up with my girlfriend and I could hear her crying in the bathroom. I then sent the proof of what happened to her friends and family. After she woke up the next day, her bag was ready and I told her to get out of my house, or I'm calling the police. She was shocked and begged me to let her stay. I told her in a very polite tone to get out of my house, and then sent a text to the guy's wife to show him the divorce papers, and as my girlfriend was leaving, her phone got flooded with messages. The court hearing will take time, but we will make the guy pay child support and fines for the emotional damage. I don't feel good breaking up a couple, but I don't think she deserved that man. She is a great person, and even if the guy broke up with my girlfriend, he probably would have cheated on his wife with another woman. Also, thank you guys for making me feel good and convincing me to get out of this toxic relationship. It'll take time for me to get over her, but surely I will. I'll also update you after a week or two about the divorce and how the lady and I are doing. Congrats, Opie. Your girlfriend definitely deserved this. She had it coming, and when it happened, I'm sure it hit her like a freight train. I'm glad you informed the affair partner's wife on the situation too. You saved not only yourself, but another innocent person in the process by doing so. I wish you the best of luck in the future, Opie. Now, let's get into today's second story. I'm nearly 2 years removed from Discovery Day and wanted to give an update on how I'm doing and how life has shaken out since that fateful day. My main purpose here is to just shed some insights into post-divorce life. I know that when I started my journey, I was always interested in the update posts out there, and so I'm paying the universe back by posting my own story. A brief recap. March 31st, 2020, my ex and I got into an argument. I saw some shady texts on her phone and confronted her and found out they were from a married male friend of hers that had told her he couldn't wait to see her in his hot tub again, which caused me to freak out. I idiotically believed her, and then I asked her if she was happy and she replied that she wanted a divorce. I later found out the depths of her infidelity and got the hell out of that life. We were together for 22 years and married for 12 of those years. We had it all, the 2 kids, the house, the stable jobs, and even a couple of cats. It was all gone in the blink of an eye. Looking back now with the benefit of some hindsight, I can't say the marriage was gone in the blink of an eye. That's not quite honest. Our marriage started to fall apart in 2017, and despite some half-hearted tries on both our ends, it didn't work out. So it was more like the bullet hit in 2017, but the body fell in 2020. There were many nights I went to sleep alone while in the marriage. She'd be working late or at the gym or hanging with friends. That's the story she went with at the time, and anytime I tried to voice my concerns, she'd get angry or defensive and nothing would change. Then we'd go right back to where we were. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't recognize any of the signs of infidelity. But hey, there's a whole subreddit dedicated to this, and I'm not alone. Member of the club right here, baby. I'm guilty of not being the best spouse. The difference, of course, is I stayed true to my vows and I can look at myself in the mirror and not have that stain on my soul. Her, not so much. It's kind of funny. Whenever I see a movie or TV show that has an element of infidelity to it, the cheater is never the hero but always the antagonist. I think to myself, well, ex-wife, that's you. Have fun watching stuff that lets you relive your nonsense over and over. My main concern throughout this whole ordeal was the children. I've got a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, and they have been one of the main drivers for me to keep pushing forward and growing to get out of the mental anguish that this brought about. They've been great and have seemed to adapt well to the week on, week off schedule. We have dinners, Taco Tuesday as a highlight, as well as Pizza Friday, where we eat pizza, drink sodas, and watch creature feature movies. Yeah, we watch movies, we play video games, we roughhouse, and we go on trips. I feel like I've stepped up to become the dad they've always wanted. I can't say that I was like that during the marriage. I was too consumed by unhappiness. Someone asked if I had told the kids about my ex's infidelity, and when I replied that I had not, I was told that I was lying to the children and that I wasn't doing them any good. I disagreed with that then, and I still disagree with that now. Being a parent to me is about protecting your children from harm the best you can. I believe that this information that mom stepped out on dad is not helpful or good for them. I feel it's mentally harmful at this stage in their lives. Maybe someday they'll find out the truth, but from my standpoint, it's not really something they need in their lives right now. They're still picking up the pieces of their lives. What's the benefit in telling them about the affair? A resentment of their mother? More anger and sadness? In terms of my ex, we only discuss the children. I take the stance of being partners in a business, with the business being our children. From that standpoint, things are good. It's cordial and business friendly. However, there's no discussion on personal matters. From my standpoint, I just don't care and I don't want to be drawn into my ex's life of nonsense. All I know of her is what I hear from our kids. They tell me she's dating a man that's 10 years younger than her and that she still has an active social life. As for me, I can confidently say that I'm far better off now than I was when I was married. There's a bit of guilt in saying that, I suppose. Something for me and my therapist to discuss. But I feel alive again, and I haven't felt this good in a long time. Therapy was transformative for me, and I'd recommend it to anyone on the fence. I also did a round of EMDR, and that was amazing to me. I've explored more hobbies, and the one that's really stuck for me is cooking. I love searching the web for recipes and trying new things, as well as hitting up grocery stores and picking up different ingredients. My whole diet has changed, and I'm guessing that has something to do with my mood and outlook on life. Outside of hobbies and therapy, I've also gotten a lift from physical exercise. I'm usually at the gym 3 to 4 times a week, and that's been great. I have muscles for the first time in ever. It was at the gym that I actually met my now girlfriend. I had no intentions of pursuing anything serious after the marriage for at least a year, but those plans kind of fell apart when I met her. She loves me, loves the kids, and we're a good team together. It's been really nice to have someone in my life that matches my needs and I match hers. I feel very fortunate in that regard. When I started this journey, I felt so alone. It was just me and my kids. My family is the epitome of unsupportiveness, but I was determined to not let this thing make me a worse version of myself. Every day I'm getting better, even on the days when I don't feel like I'm getting better. That's all this is really, small improvements that add up to a whole new and better life in the long run. Someone said to me that I should strive to look back at this time in life with pride and my head held high. I think for the most part I've done that. To anyone reading this that's just starting out their journey, or maybe they don't feel like they're where they want to be post-divorce, I hope you can take some solace in my story. It hasn't always been sunshine and beers in the park, but there have been more good days than bad. And even if you have a bad day, it's just one day. Tomorrow's the start to a whole new journey. Wow, Opie, that's great to hear how well you're doing. I do have to mention that I personally disagree with not telling the kids. It doesn't have to be right away, but it's best that they know. The parent who tells the kids also controls the narrative. You don't want your wife lying to your kids about what happened and trying to turn them against you. It's not a matter of revenge. It's a matter of them knowing what actually happened, which is that your wife cheated and ruined your marriage. Besides that, you seem to be living your best version of yourself. Keep it up, Opie. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so yet, and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's stories. If there's a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. My wife and I had a great life together. We met within a church and started dating when she was 23 and I was 21. We were ready to get married in the eyes of God after 2 years of dating. We didn't move in or sleep together before that, opting to wait until marriage. I was sure she was an angel. She knew how to cook and even brought me cooked meals while we dated. She made it clear that she knew how to be a traditional wife that honored her husband. She was so good at being the perfect example of a Christian woman and wife that she wrote a book. It was really good, and a lot of her publicity started within our family, church, and hometown. She found a connection to a Christian publication company that supported her and what she stood for. We spent every moment together, and I fully supported her unexpected career as an author. For 3 years, we had an amazing, peaceful marriage. She was my rock. I loved how she excelled at the duties of a wife while managing to work on her second book. Before either of us knew it, she was going on her very first book tour. When she returned home, I unpacked her suitcase in the morning while she slept. A copy of her book fell out of a bundle of clothes. When I picked it up, I noticed she had signed it to someone named Ray with a sweet message and her phone number. I was so confused. Why would she do this, and why would she still have the book mixed in with her clothes? I woke her up and asked her about it. She is stumped and panicked, but plays it off as sleepy irritation. She asked me why I was going through her stuff. I told her I just wanted to help her unpack and found this. She calmly explained that it was for a woman named Ray who loved her book and had gotten lunch with her. She had accidentally left it on the table when she left, so my wife planned to give it back to her. This didn't sound right. How did she leave the book without my wife being able to stop her? I pointed out that the spelling was likely wrong if she really was a woman. My wife asked me what I meant by that, saying it wasn't fair for me to assume she was lying. I asked her one more time if she was telling me the truth, and she swore she was being honest. She started to look genuinely concerned when she realized how upset I was. She got up and gave me a long hug, kissing my neck, swearing that I was the only man for her and our life together had only just begun. I left the room feeling confused and slightly concerned. A few days later, I got home from work and noticed her through the living room window, talking on the phone. She was laying on the couch, bouncing her crossed legs and spinning her hair. She was smiling ear to ear, giggling, biting her lip. She looked adorable, but I had no idea who she talked to like that. When I walked in, she must have hung up on the person because she was instantly off the phone, greeting me as if all was normal. Over dinner, I asked her who she was talking with on the phone. She looked a little surprised that I saw, but she quickly and shamelessly admitted it was the woman, Ray. I wanted to check her phone to see what number it was and try to call it. That night, for the first time, my wife put her phone under her pillow to sleep, claiming it would be easier for her to hear her alarm. I thought about demanding her phone right then and there, but I honestly started to doubt myself. I wasn't sure she was up to anything out of the ordinary because she was normally a social butterfly. Just because she was talking to someone or multiple people didn't mean she was cheating on me. I really wanted to sleep that night because I was exhausted, so I didn't start anything. The next morning, she told me she was going to be home late because she was going to meet with her publishing agent, Tracy. This made sense because she was working on a second book. I asked her how it was coming along, and she read some of it to me. I asked where they'd be meeting, and she told me where the publishing office was located. I told her I thought they closed at 4, and she said she was going late because that was the only time Tracy had available to see her. I asked why they couldn't meet another day and explained that I didn't like it when she wasn't home when I was off work. My wife snapped and said she'd been feeling this sense of distrust lately, and she hated it. Before walking away, she told me I needed to knock it off. That was the first time my wife ever said anything like that to me. I drove to the publishing office after work and found the parking lot empty, zero cars. I drove around aimlessly for a bit, calling my wife over and over. I felt extremely lost and betrayed. I went home and tried to stay awake to wait for her, but I fell asleep around 1 a.m. I'm surprised that I didn't wake up whenever my wife got home. She just snuck into her room and went to bed. I found her the next morning sound asleep. I checked my phone and noticed a delayed Easy Pass notification. My wife never took the turnpike anywhere unless it was to promote her writing career, and in those situations, she always told me. I was sure now she was having an affair, but I wanted to catch her red-handed, so she couldn't lie to me anymore. The time I spent waiting for her to actually separate from her phone felt like an eternity. She didn't make it obvious that she was texting, but I could tell she was in communication with someone. When she finally separated from her phone, it was because she spilled a soda and went to grab a towel. I grabbed her phone and went into the bathroom. I installed a tracking app as quickly as I could, hiding it in a utilities folder on her phone. I didn't have time to look through her phone for anything. I just prayed this would work. I heard her wonder out loud where her phone went. I decided to call the house phone as a distraction. When she went to answer it, I jumped out of the bathroom and put her phone in the couch cushions. She didn't have a clue. I got home from work a week later, and she told me she was going to a book signing the next day, hours away, so she'd be spending the night in Lancaster. That town made sense according to the Easy Pass charges. I pretended to be fine with it, but I knew I was going to follow her. She planned to depart while I was at work, so I had to call off. I couldn't focus on work anyway. Since I suspected my wife of infidelity, I called Tracy to ask about the book signing my wife was going to. She validated my concern by telling me that there wouldn't be another book signing for months. When I told her I suspected my wife of cheating on me, she said if that was the case, they wouldn't continue working with her to promote her book. I lost her for a bit after she got off the exit, but I was able to locate her on the tracking app. She was at an inn. I parked and watched her bring in her luggage. Not even 10 minutes later, another car pulled up. A man got out with flowers and knocked on her door. She answered it and squealed she was so excited. She threw her arms around his neck and started kissing him passionately. His hands immediately started feeling her body and intimate parts. I jumped out of the car and sprinted over to them. When they heard me and turned to look, my wife made a very distressed noise that I never heard her make before. First, she asked me what I was doing there. I asked her what he was doing here. He asked me who I was, and I wanted to punch him. I yelled that I was her husband, and he started backing off. He threw his arms up and went for his car. My wife called after him and looked at me like I just broke her heart. She started stammering. She wanted to be mad at me, but she was the one that was caught. I accused her of cheating on me and throwing away our entire relationship and life together for some random man that read her book. I started walking away, realizing this was the worst moment of my life, and it was only the beginning of the end. My wife chased after me, trying to convince me to talk to her. I told her I didn't have another word to say, and she should spend her energy trying to save her job. I left her there in the parking lot. She tried calling me and texting me several times, all while I canceled the bank cards she had that connected to my bank account. I knew she was counting on that for Easy Pass and her car payment. I stopped on the way home for new door locks. She showed up the next day and tried to use her key. When that didn't work, she stopped around the backyard, trying to slide open the glass door. Her name wasn't on the mortgage because her credit was non-existent. I was going to make sure she suffered the consequences of wasting years of my life and cheating on me. I yelled through the glass door that she didn't deserve a house, home, or husband. She stood there and tried calling me 12 times while making eye contact. I just sipped my coffee. I felt proud. I knew I could call the police on her at any moment and have her removed from my property, and I think she knew that, which is why she was trying so hard to be sweet. She left voicemails while standing at the back door. I walked away when she said she loved me. She started yelling and crying. I came back a half hour later, and she was still there. Through the back door, she begged me not to tell her parents or the church about what she'd done. She didn't want them to know she lost her career and husband by cheating. She begged me to give her a few trial days to see if she could make up for what she'd done. I left her here. There's nothing anyone can do to recover from cheating on their spouse. You just don't do it. While she sat there, I called her parents. She pounded on the glass in frustration, realizing she had nothing and no power. Her reputation was about to be shot within her church and family, and her book career was already brought to a screeching halt. As I spoke to her parents about what she'd done, she drove off angrily, probably to try to convince them it wasn't true or ask them for a place to stay. Either way, she was back in 2 hours, laying clothes from her suitcase on the porch like she was going to sleep there. I called the police, and she was ordered to leave. She threw a fit, but narrowly avoided an arrest. To this day, she is still trying to find stability in life. She keeps hopping from sketchy to dodgy situations and relying on her very poor choices. Her Christian life, marriage, book, and family are all things of the past. She's living a very different life now. Opie, there is never any excuse for a cheating spouse, but it seems so much worse that she went against her own writing and values for something so worthless. What does an affair do besides cause absolute destruction and pain? Even if the truth is slow to come out, it always does. Especially for people who are making money off of fake personas. From what it sounds like, your ex will never fully recover from giving up the husband she chose under God. This is a great lesson to our readers to always uphold personal values and morals. Never betray other people, especially people you love, for perceived personal gain. It never works out in the end when karma catches up to you. Now for our second story. By the time this story concludes, my wife and I had been together for a total of 14 years. 9 of those were in marriage. When we finally got married, I was certain I was making the right decision. I waited many years before proposing so I could be sure she was an honorable woman who truly wanted a lifelong relationship. So many women today don't know what they want. They claim they want a husband, but once they get used to that, they become bored and change their minds. My wife proved me wrong. She stayed loyal to me in the 5 years leading up to my proposal and several years into our marriage. She helped me through the loss of my father and all the times I struggled to press on. I was in college to become a surgeon, and it was no easy task. I relied on her to take care of me because much of the time my brain was filled with medical terms and the things I had to remember. On the days she wasn't home or able to help me, I was so busy and absorbed in my work that I didn't eat and felt scrambled. She was my rock and peace, the kind of woman a man makes his wife. Once I started working as a surgeon, I saved money for 1 year and then bought us a mansion. I don't like bragging, I'm just telling the truth. My wife was set for life. She had a man that loved her more than anything and chose to share his wealth, prosperity, and life with her. I knew she loved me because she stayed with me through the times when I was too busy and exhausted to give her any special attention. I made up for it by taking her out weekly to the hottest spots in town. Eating, dancing, go-kart racing, whatever she wanted. We went to festivals, concerts, parties, beaches, you name it. Eventually we bought a yacht and started hosting parties. I could tell my wife was loving this. She started some social media accounts that became glorified. I didn't really like that, but I didn't feel like I could tell her to stop. So many people have accounts like it, and she really enjoyed it. I didn't have any accounts myself, so I didn't see everything she posted. She posted a lot of photos and videos with me and her, and it was fun. I felt like our life together was the best life I could have ever asked for. My wife made a name for herself as a wealthy, sociable, beautiful woman that is worth getting to know. Whenever we hosted parties, more and more people started to attend. I wasn't very emotionally invested in any of these people because I didn't have very much time off work. My energy was divided between my work and my wife. While I worked, my wife stayed home. She sent me a selfie every day to update me with what she was doing. Around the time I started to realize I didn't want us to host parties anymore, I got random texts at work. I received lots of random messages from people that knew me before I knew them. This one was bad news though. It said that my wife was messing around with people on the yacht while I was at work. By the time I saw this message, hours had passed. I called my wife right away, and she answered calmly. She was confused when I told her about the text. She assured me she never takes the yacht out without me. I wanted to believe her because she never gave me a reason to doubt her. She was upset and irritated that some random person was trying to get her husband to question her integrity. The next morning, I stopped at the yacht before work to take a picture of the gas gauge. I also noticed the trash can was empty. While I was in my office, my wife messaged me saying she spoke to the person who texted me and cleared up the confusion. She said that this was a woman who was jealous of our relationship and lifestyle. I asked her how she got the number, and it took her a while to reply. She finally admitted that she couldn't sleep the night prior, so she looked at my phone to get the number. I asked her what the woman's name was, and she didn't want to tell me. She just told me not to worry about it and that encountering haters was inevitable. I let it go for the moment and just replied asking her that we not host a party that weekend. I didn't feel like it. Instead, I wanted to spend time alone with her. She didn't reply to my message at all. On the way home, I checked the gas gauge of the yacht. It was noticeably lower. Noticing this, I started to snoop around the boat. Under a cushion, I found a button I didn't recognize. I laid on the bed and smelled cologne I didn't know. I continued looking for about 30 minutes before I checked the trash can. There, I found a bunch of used napkins and paper towels. I went home prepared to confront my wife with the evidence that she took the yacht out without me and must have had someone with her. Before I could get out a word, she demanded to know why I didn't want to host a party that weekend. In response, I asked her why she wanted to host another party this weekend. She just stared at me like I was stupid before she asked why wouldn't we. I was getting annoyed, so I told her I noticed the change in the gas gauge. She looked dumbfounded and asked me how I knew it was different, so I told her I checked it before I went to work. She blew up on me. She couldn't believe that I didn't trust her and went so far as to gather evidence against her. I told her it was my right to investigate my boat and wife for any signs of dishonesty. She scoffed and said she didn't know why I thought the gas was less because she wasn't on the boat that day. That's when I brought up the stuff in the trash can. She looked extremely embarrassed and wouldn't make eye contact with me. She threw her hand up and walked away like a snotty supermodel. When Saturday morning came, she started preparing food that she wanted to bring on the yacht for a party. I reminded her that I didn't want her to host a party this weekend. I wanted her to stay home with me so we could spend quality time together. She said if I didn't want to go, I could stay home, but I couldn't make her stay home because it was her boat just as much as it was mine. This really irritated me. I told her she wasn't being a fair or considerate wife, and I missed how she used to be. Her face softened, and she said she just wanted to have a great time on the yacht with me and her friends in the time I had off. She got close to me and started rubbing my chest. In the hopes that I could spy on my wife and the people she spent time with, I caved in. I wanted her to believe I was going to have fun, even though this was strictly an investigation. On the boat, she talked to a lot of people, but it was mostly men. The women on the boat were just looking for the man that was going to worship them the way they believed they deserved, and the men on the boat just wanted to find the next girl to play with. All the conversation seemed pointless, and I was growing impatient. This wasn't what I had in mind when I considered marriage. I thought it would just be me and my wife, but now she chose to surround herself with other people. She tried to say she was friends with women and men, but I was seeing something completely different. One man in particular seemed to be the center of her attention. I approached them and introduced myself. He seemed innocent enough, just a regular guy with a regular business. However, he smelled like the mystery cologne on the bed below deck. The next morning before work, I installed a well-hidden camera on the boat pointing at the bed. It was connected to an app on my phone. I could speak through the camera too. Even though I was suspicious, I was very surprised when I checked the live feed after I got out of surgery. I could see my beautiful wife going at it with the same smelly man. I watched in horror for a few seconds before I voiced my opinion through the camera. They both jumped, struggled to cover themselves, and looked around. It took them 9 minutes to find the camera. My wife was so infuriated that she rummaged around to find a wrench and started beating the camera. That was the woman she became. An entitled, selfish, inconsiderate monster that did not want to face the consequences of her actions. I posted the video of her getting caught online, and it got hundreds of thousands of views, more than her glorified accounts. The video became associated with her accounts, and the scandal was talked about everywhere. She became known as the boat partying wife of a doctor that lost it all. We had signed a prenup, so she didn't get anything in the divorce. I don't think she ever planned on doing what she did. She became brainwashed and obsessed with the attention and validation of people, men, that weren't her husband, and it poisoned her until she couldn't function as a loyal wife anymore. With her image ruined and nothing to her name, she had no idea what to do with herself. She tried so hard to turn her publicity into an opportunity for income, but she failed. She ended up taking a lousy job and room for rent just to survive without me. She chose to let other men into her life by hosting these parties, and she probably justified it because you were there for some of the time. Then she started seeing the man she was attracted to while you were at work. I'm sure that her online presence gave her the courage and entitlement she needed to entertain ideas of other men. She went from being an honorable, humble woman to one that was willing to cheat on the man she chose to marry and go through life with. This is a terrible consequence of zero self-control, zero accountability, and an ego blown way out of proportion. Maybe if she spent time meditating while you were at work instead of posting on her phone and advertising her glamorous lifestyle, she might have remained loyal, thankful, and happy. Thank you for sharing your story and making your wife sign a prenup. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I, 35 male, and my wife, 34 female, met each other in college. It was love at first sight. We were in the same thesis group during our senior year. We went to a large school, and we didn't have the same major, so we didn't cross paths until then. We were both from 2 different states, but we loved the city our school was in, so we planned on staying there after graduation. We didn't want to live together right after college because we worried that it would put a lot of pressure on our relationship. We continued dating as normal for a year after graduating and decided that we wanted to live together then. I never once doubted our relationship. I knew that she was the only woman for me, and I planned on marrying her. I proposed to her when we were 25, and a lot of our friends from school were surprised by it. A lot of people didn't think we were going to last. Nobody ever explained why, other than the fact that my wife and I were total opposites. I was always very introverted and quiet, and she was outgoing and had a tendency to be loud at times. She was the life of the party in any room, and people gravitated toward her. That was one of the things that I loved the most about her, so I never even thought twice about it. After we got married, we were together for 12 years. We had 3 children together, owned a home, and were planning on retiring in 10 years and moving to a small town in Vermont. Unfortunately, my wife decided to throw all of that away. My wife was a marketing executive, and she had a pretty lavish job. She traveled a lot, and she managed a lot of overseas clients for her firm. I always thought that we had a strong foundation for our marriage, so I never worried about her when she went abroad on business. I knew that she went sightseeing and had friends in different countries, but I never suspected that she would be cheating on me when she left. I never suspected anything until I found a pregnancy test in her bathroom while she was away. After our third child, we decided we didn't want any more kids. We went over all the options, and the least expensive and least invasive way to prevent pregnancy would be getting a vasectomy. So I did. After that, my wife stopped taking birth control, and we didn't have any issues. So, when I was cleaning my bathroom and saw a pregnancy test in the trash, can it raise some suspicions? In hindsight, she had been displaying signs of morning sickness, but if she needed to take that test, that meant that she was at risk of getting pregnant, and I knew it couldn't have been by me. When I found the test, my wife was abroad. She was on a 6-hour time difference from us, and I knew that she was probably asleep. At least, when I talked to her around 4 p.m. my time, that's what she told me she was doing. Out of curiosity, I checked her location on my iPhone to see that she wasn't at her hotel. It looked like she was at a restaurant in the heart of Stockholm. If she wanted to go out to dinner with a friend, she would have told me that, and I wouldn't have had any issue with it. Instead, she lied to me about going to bed. I knew that if she was lying to me, she must have been up to something. I went into her office and logged into her computer to look at her emails. Thankfully for me, she kept her lodging credentials on the inside of her notebook. I searched through everything that I could to find any sign of an affair, and I found it. It seemed like she was sleeping with a client she was on a work trip to see. I looked through emails and saw exchanges of pictures and updates about each other's lives. The message chain that I found dated back 3 years, but it looked like there were even more before then. They were telling each other about their families and plans for the future. A lot of the messages seemed very friendly, then some were extremely explicit. I did some digging and I found out who the guy was. I already knew that he was a client, but I didn't know that when my wife studied abroad in college, she met him and they had stayed in contact ever since. She knew him even before she knew me. It looked like both of them lived their lives with their families and jobs, and whenever they had the chance, they would get together for sex. I spent the entire night looking through the vast history that they shared, trying to piece everything together. I was destroyed by it. I loved my wife more than anything in the world, and she had kept a secret like that from me the entire time I knew her. I didn't know the person I was married to, and I wanted out. There was no way I was going to stay with somebody who would lie the way that my wife had. I contacted a divorce attorney first thing in the morning and sent them all of the documents I'd put together with screenshots from my wife's computer. On top of everything I found, I discovered some interesting business secrets between my wife and her affair partner that I thought her boss might want to be privy to. Mainly her trips abroad were entirely unnecessary. She was budgeting in fake trips at work and paying with company cards. There were private conversations between her and the other man where they planned dates to get together, and I came up with viable excuses for work. It was just an added level to how deceitful my wife was. I didn't tell my wife about it when I found everything out. Instead, I waited for her to get home. However, when she texted me before her 13-hour plane ride home, I had a brilliant idea to blow up everything for her while she was blissfully unaware. I reached out to her boss and I sent him everything. He was shocked by the information and told me that he was going to speak to others to see if he could gather more information. Meanwhile, I packed a few bags for myself and the kids and went to stay at my mother's house. We weren't going to be there when my wife returned home. Later that day, I put my kids to bed and eagerly awaited the phone calls from my wife as she realized exactly what was happening to her. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, I got dozens of text messages and calls from her telling me that we needed to talk. She asked me where I was with the kids, and all I did was respond that I was divorcing her and the kids were safe with me and their grandmother. She ended up coming over to the house and demanding to see the kids while they were asleep, causing a big scene. I showed her the kids so she knew that they were okay. Then I told her she had to leave. I advised her to get a divorce attorney and to be prepared for whatever her boss had in store for her. She told me that I had no right to go through her personal belongings the way that I did, and she planned on filing a lawsuit against me. I didn't know how something like that would hold up, but I figured I would talk to my divorce attorney about it anyway. From what I understand, something similar happened with her partner abroad. I sent information to his employer about the misuse of company time and funds. I didn't know them, but I followed his wife on social media to see if there were any updates. She did end up leaving him. I divorced my wife, and she tried to put up quite the fight in the courtroom. There weren't any grounds for her to sue me in any way. On top of the divorce, her former employer filed against her for embezzlement of company funds. It looks like she's going to be getting out of that with a hefty fine, but she likely won't have to face jail time. However, the embezzlement suit helped me in the custody hearing. Now I'm living my life happily without her. It hurt a lot at first, and it took a lot of adjusting, but I know now that she wasn't who I thought she was. The woman I married never would have treated me the way that she did. I'm glad that I found out who she really was and left her while I had the chance. Opie, it sounds like your wife was a pathological liar. To be able to continue an affair with somebody abroad for as long as she was without ever showing an inkling of the truth is scary. She seemed to have mastered the craft of lying. It's good that you contacted her employer about what she was doing, because it is illegal to use company funds to buy yourself plane tickets and hotel rooms. She's lucky that she got away with just a slap on the wrist and nothing more. For the affair to have gone on for as long as it was, I would venture to say that she embezzled quite a bit of company money over the years. I'm glad that you are away from her now and realizing that you are better off without her. Now, let's move on to our next story. My wife and I had been married for 8 years and we had 2 children together. I loved her dearly and I would have done anything to make her happy, but she ruined our family. We met through a dating app and started seeing each other shortly after matching. We just had so much in common, and we clicked right away, so it only made sense for us to see where the relationship could go. Things got serious when she got pregnant with our first child. I think the news kind of fast-forwarded our relationship. It wasn't something that either of us seemed to be upset about, though. We were excited and we were in love. My wife gave birth to our beautiful daughter, and we were as happy as could be. We got married after she gave birth to our daughter, and we settled down in a nice house shortly after that. The order we did things was kind of backward, but it all worked out in the end for us, or at least that's what I thought. The first couple of years of our marriage were rocky. We had only been dating for about 6 months when she got pregnant, so we didn't know each other that well. We weren't even living together at the time. There were a lot of things about our personalities that clashed when we were living in such proximity to each other. I was always a little out there with my personality, extroverted and outgoing. I wanted to do things when I had the chance and experience life. My wife, on the other hand, was very reserved and liked to relax. Sometimes I thought that I was too high energy for her. We got into arguments now and then, but we always settled them amicably and moved on. I thought that communication was a strong suit of ours. If there was an argument where we couldn't settle it right away and either of us was mad, my wife would go to her sister's house and spend the night there. I knew that she would vent and get everything off her chest, and then in the morning she would come back and we would talk. All of those feelings were only exacerbated when she gave birth to her second child. Don't get me wrong, I love my son more than anything, but he was driving both of us crazy as a newborn. He would stay up all night long and cry, and it took hours to get him to fall asleep. Everyone in the house was sleep deprived and irritable all the time for the first month after bringing him home. Eventually, we figured out a way to soothe him and get everything back to normal. I hate saying this because it sounds like a stereotypical toxic thing to say, but my wife stayed home to take care of the kids and I worked 70 hours a week. A lot of the times when he was up crying, I was trying to get as much sleep as possible for work. I kind of expected my wife to be the one to take care of him. Months had passed since that was an issue, and I hadn't even realized that it was something that my wife was holding on to. It was a grudge that she had with me that I didn't even know about that she couldn't let go of. One night we had gotten into a fight over something trivial, and she brought all of it up. She threw it in my face as if I were a negligent father and a bad partner because I wouldn't take care of our son while he was crying at night. I argued my side, telling her that I had to work and the exhaustion was affecting it. I helped often with our daughter, so I didn't understand why she couldn't see where I was coming from. She was very upset about everything, and eventually she stormed out, leaving me to take care of both the kids for the night. I did just that and waited for her to come back in the morning to talk about it like we always did. She got back much later than she normally did the following day, which only made my frustration worse because I had to call in sick for work that day because of it. It seemed like she genuinely didn't care about my time and what effect her actions had on me. It was around noon when she got home and we talked about everything. She was extra apologetic to me. It seems like she didn't want to talk about anything, rather, she just wanted to concede to whatever it was that I had to say and put an end to it all. When it was over, she left to go say hi to the kids, and we didn't bring it up again. Over the next couple of months, she was acting a lot different. There was a spring in her step that I couldn't quite figure out what happened to get it. She would visit her sister usually once or twice a week before, but during that time she was going every other date, it seemed. I didn't think much of it at the time. Looking back, I know exactly why she was going over there. Sometimes she would bring the kids, sometimes she would ask me to watch them and go by herself. I found out the truth of what was happening when I saw her sneak out of bed one night to take a call. I guess she forgot to put her phone on silent before going to bed that night because her ringer woke me up. She answered it before I could say anything to ask what was happening, and she whispered for the person on the other end to hang on before she snuck away from me. Right away, I clocked what was happening as strange. It was weird for her to be getting a call in the middle of the night first of all, then on top of that for her to answer it and sneak off was also weird. I stayed still and pretended not to notice, and I waited for her to leave. After a minute, I tiptoed out of the room to see what was happening. I heard noises coming from the laundry room and pressed my ear to the door to try and hear what it was. I could hear somebody on speakerphone telling my wife to do things to herself, and my wife clearly enjoying them. She had snuck off to have phone sex with someone. I listened for a couple of minutes while it continued. The person on the other end was whispering and trying to be quiet, which told me that they were both doing something they shouldn't have been. I contemplated bursting through the door to confront them, but I decided I wanted to play it a different way. So I went back to the bedroom and pretended to go to sleep. She didn't come back for about half an hour. I stayed up waiting until I could hear her snoring next to me, and I got out of bed, taking her phone with me into the kitchen. I looked at her most recent call and saw that it was a familiar name. It was her sister's boyfriend. Her sister, her best friend in the world, had been dating her boyfriend for 5 years, and she was head over heels in love with him. Her sister dated a lot of losers, and she thought that her boyfriend was the one for her. She wanted to marry him and start a family with him. As shocked as I was that my wife was cheating on me, the fact that she was cheating on me with her sister's boyfriend made it so much worse. I just couldn't believe it. I looked through the text messages and saw both of them planning times to get together when her sister wouldn't be home and sending each other pictures and videos. I was already extremely upset about the cheating and the lying, but then I saw times when my wife told him that she had to bring the kids along with her. I was furious and I wanted to ruin everything for her. I took as many screenshots and I saved as many videos as I could and I sent all of them to myself. I went back to the bedroom and put her phone back, then went to the living room to sleep for the night. I couldn't stand to be around her. I called out of work the following day and went to a cafe where I searched online for a divorce attorney. I found one and set up a meeting with them as soon as possible to end my marriage. On top of that, I wanted to tell her sister about everything before my wife had a chance to go in and make it seem like I was lying. I drove to the restaurant where her sister worked and waited for her shift to end. When I saw her in the parking lot, I got her attention and asked her if we could talk. She seemed confused and also a little nervous, but she joined me in my car. I told her everything I knew. I showed her where I thought she could stomach from the videos and screenshots that I had. She was heartbroken by it all. Her sister was supposed to be the person she could trust most in the world, but instead she broke that trust. She was hysterical. After she recovered, I asked her what she wanted to do, and she immediately told me that she was kicking her boyfriend out of the house. She got angry very quickly as she started talking about it. I hadn't realized, but he didn't have a job and he wasn't paying rent with her. He was basically a broke, talentless SoundCloud rapper. I ended up driving her to her house and staying there with her while she broke up with her boyfriend, kicking him out of the house and throwing his things out of the window. Her boyfriend seemed like he wanted to beat me up, but he didn't try. If he did, I would have probably sent him to the hospital. When all of that was done, she and I drove back to my house where we both confronted my wife. My wife tried to defend herself and say that the videos that I had were deep fakes and that I was just trying to sabotage her. Why that was something I wanted to do, I didn't know. She didn't have a leg to stand on in her arguments. I told her that I wanted her to get out of the house and I was going to be divorcing her. She started crying about how she didn't have anywhere else to go and she was begging for forgiveness. She told my sister that it just happened one day when she was mad at me. She tried to blame it all on the boyfriend by saying he saw how vulnerable she was and he swooped in to try and seduce her. He was sleazy enough to try something like that, but that didn't mean that my wife had to agree to it. If he kissed her, she could have pushed him away and then told me and her sister. She didn't do that. Instead, she slept with him and then carried on an affair that lasted several months. Now I have divorced my wife and I have full custody of the kids. The deciding factor in that was how she brought them along to have an affair. The judge didn't like the sound of that. Her sister has cut her off completely. They don't have any contact with each other, and from what her sister has told me, a lot of their family has ended communication with my wife as well. I still see her sister regularly because she is the aunt to my children. She loves them, and I didn't think it would be fair to cut her out of their lives. Ultimately, I'm glad that I found out about my wife's true colors. Looking back at our relationship, it didn't seem like we were meant to be together, and we're finally both out of the relationship. I wish it could have ended differently, but I think everything happens for a reason, and unfortunately, the journey here was a little rockier than I would have liked. Opie, I can't imagine finding out that your wife is cheating on you the way that you did. It must have been incredibly difficult to go back to bed after you heard what you did and pretend like nothing happened. I think your wife's behavior was truly abhorrent. Cheating is already awful, but cheating with your sister's partner is terrible, especially when she knew her sister's history with men and how much she loved the guy that she was with. It might be easy to assume that this wasn't the first time he cheated in the relationship, but it would have been the most hurtful way for him to cheat. I think that the excuse that your wife gave was pathetic. She couldn't take responsibility for her actions, and I think that just further shows how immature she was. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me.